Invincible Louisa by Cornelia Meigs, Chapter 10, Happy Ending. Whenever Bronson Alcott used to set off for his lecturing journeys to the West, there was always a good deal of flurry in the old orchard house. May would tie his neckcloth and give him a final brushing. Abba Alcott would offer him last reminders of the ways in which he was to take care of himself. Louisa would go through his bag to make sure that he had packed everything. New shirts, socks in great quantities, warm flannels, the sage himself in a new overcoat. Even after years of prosperity, Louisa always found it astonishing that they should at last have everything that they really needed. There was a family saying, "Poor is poverty, but serene is heaven," which well described their state in the earlier days. No matter what they lacked, they always made merry over it. Now there was just the same hilarity and gay-hearted affection, while behind it all was the new solid sense of well-being, so that even though old age was upon the elders of that house, there would never again be want and anxiety. It was Louisa alone who did the most of the preparation for the departure now, since May was away and their mother grown so feeble. The lectures were more and more of a success every year. Bronson said that due to his daughter's fame, that he was so cordially received and declared that he was riding in Louisa's chariot. That was not entirely true. His latter achievements well bore out the first spirited statement made on that cold night in the shabby Boston house so many years ago, the unquenched assertion that though he had earned only $1 on the first expedition, he had opened the way and would do better another time. It was with pride and confidence that they saw him go, Louisa doing the active work of getting him ready, her mother watching in quiet pleasure. Abba Alcott was slowly slipping into the rest and peace, which were to be greater even than any Louisa could give. She was cheerful and free from suffering. Through weeks and months of failing, Bronson had come home, and Louisa's arms were close about her when she finally went away. How strange it was to be in that household and know that the strong spirit which had ruled it so long was absent. It was hard that May was not there to help them bear the loss and the loneliness which came after, a sense of desolation which Louisa found it so difficult to accept. Her greatest tribute to her mother is perhaps in her statement of what was and what was not taken from life in Little Women. Mrs. March is all true, only not half good enough. When Bronson set off on his next journey, May was not there, Abba was not there, but Louisa and Anna had joined forces to face their sorrow. They did not stay on in Orchard House after Abba Alcott's final illness came upon her. Louisa had never really liked the place, could never overcome the disappointment that Elizabeth had not lived to enjoy it, could never forget her own hideous struggle with illness in that upper room. For some time she had wanted to buy a house for Anna and the two boys, one nearer to the town. She finally purchased the house on Main Street, which had belonged to Henry Thoreau, and thither they had moved before her mother left them. It is a smaller, more compact, more comfortable dwelling, neat and square and white, like its dignified Concord neighbors, the Pratt family. Anna's children and grandchildren lived there after them, so that the last of the Alcott kindred occupy it still. The final book of Louisa's, which her mother read, was one of the most unusual kind. Louisa could never quite put aside her taste for startling events and her love for writing tales, which bordered on the fantastic. The firm of Roberts Brothers was getting out a succession of novels which they called the No Name series. The books were all by well-known authors of the day, but were published without names, so that the public should have the excitement of a little mystery and some exercise at guessing who had written them. Louisa was delighted to be asked to contribute a book and plunged into the composition of a modern Mephistopheles. She had always loved Goethe and his powerful version of the story of Faust. In this tale, she gives her conception of a parallel with the Faust legend, enacted in her own time. She enjoyed it enormously and was delighted over the mystification which followed its appearance. People would not easily guess that the author of Little Women could have produced this emotional and tragic novel, and were greatly puzzled. In time, of course, the secret was revealed and the book was finally published with her own name. Her mother got as much enjoyment out of the small stir of excitement as did Louisa when the novel was finished. Louisa began another story for boys and girls, Under the Lilacs. Abba Alcott did not live to read it. May did not come home on the occasion of her mother's death. Instead, she sent great and happy news of her own. She was to be married to Ernest Nierreicher, a Swiss whom she had met in London. It seemed an exceedingly happy combination of congenial spirits, so that May's joyous letters were a source of great comfort to Louisa in the year that followed. A sad, hard, lonely year, since Louisa must work to care for them all at home, and her own health was growing more and more precarious. She longed to go to visit May, as her sister urged, but was not well enough for any such journey to be possible. Just before leaving the orchard house, they had all been delighted over an honor which had come to Bronson Alcott. The school of philosophy, long talked of, was finally established. The meetings held in a wooden building put up in the grounds of the old house. Here summer sessions were held, and all the sages of Concord, Alcott, Emerson, and other members of a very goodly company gave forth their wisdom. It was well attended, people coming from all directions, knowing that this was a rare opportunity. The great feature of the summer was Emerson Day, when real tribute was paid to that man who had influenced so much, had done so much good, and had been an unfaltering friend to those who so greatly needed him. One more act of friendship he was to be called upon to perform for his dear Alcotts. It was the hardest of all. A year after May's marriage, tidings arrived of a further event. Louisa had waited long for her namesake, but she now need wait no more. Here was young Louisa again, Louisa May Nierreicher. May was so happy she seemed to have nothing left for which to ask except to see her sister. Such a tugging at my heart to see May, Louisa says, as an echo to that wish, and spoke more than once of a heaviness of misgiving about her beloved sister. It was about a month later that Louisa was called downstairs in the new house to see Mr. Emerson. One glance at his white, infinitely distressed face warned her of why he had come. Ernest Nierreicher had sent him a cablegram whose contents he was to hand to Louisa. The fateful paper was in his hand. "My child, I wish I could prepare you, but alas, alas." His voice broke, and he could do no more than give her the telegram. "I am prepared," Louisa answered steadily. All her old resolute spirit came to her aid as she read the news, which was to hurt her almost beyond bearing. May was dead. Gay, carefree May, whose happiness had so brightened life for them all. It was scarcely to be believed. Thus, when life seemed completely settled for Louisa, with nothing before her but the steady progress of years, there came a complete change. Her mother had given her the task of caring for her father. She had expected that and was fulfilling the undertaking with her whole heart. Now May also had told those about her that if she did not live, her sister was to have her baby, and so young Louisa Nierreicher came to be Louisa's own, and henceforth the household was to revolve around her. Louisa could not go to Switzerland to get May's little daughter as she longed to do, but sent a trusted woman to bring her home. Sophie Nierreicher came also, May's sister-in-law. When they arrived some months later, Louisa was waiting at the wharf, where she had stood to watch May sail away. The captain came off the ship carrying a yellow-haired baby, a little portrait of May, come to comfort Louisa. She was royally welcomed and carried home, and many times at night Louisa would go into her room to look at her in her small bed, to make sure that she was really there. Louisa still could scarcely credit the idea that May was gone, and that Lulu was there in her place. One of the ways in which children are a comfort in their ability to keep one occupied and absorbed in them. Lulu was no easy child to manage. She was Louisa over again in her stormy moods and her inflexible will. Louisa had hoped to take all the care of her, but that was impossible owing to her own lack of health. She kept house for Lulu, bought a summer cottage by the sea for Lulu, and later a house in Louisburg Square. She made little songs and sang them to Lulu and wrote brief stories for her. It was during the second year after Lulu arrived that Concord suffered the loss of two commanding spirits whose presence had made history there. Ralph Waldo Emerson died in April 1882, a man so deeply mourned that it hardly seemed possible that Concord could continue to be Concord without him. Great things he did, and small, and all of them good. Not only was he a leader of the thought of his time, wise and temperate in judgment when others were running headlong into new ideas, he was also the help and standby of many a struggling genius, many another besides the Alcotts. He has a sweet way of bestowing gifts on the table under a book or behind a candlestick when he thinks father wants a little money and no one will help him earn, Louisa said of him. The time for such need had passed for the Alcotts, but the memory of his kindness would never grow dim. It was on his account that the Alcotts lived in Concord. It was he who oversaw Louisa's reading and taught her much of what she knew about life and people. Always he was a sure counselor in any time of distress. He understood and appreciated every member of the gifted family and was a help to each one in turn. One day, as he and Louisa were speaking of Bronson, he exclaimed, "Louisa, your father might have talked with Plato." It was the tribute to her beloved father which, above all others, Louisa appreciated the most and remembered longest. After Emerson was gone, the real Bronson Alcott did not abide long without him. In the autumn of the same year, he suffered a stroke of paralysis, and although he lived on, he was feeble, almost helpless, and never really himself again. He was happy, and, with his quiet spirit, apparently at peace within himself, but his active life was over. Louisa and Anna took devoted care of him. They did not spend much time in Concord after Mr. Emerson died. Louisa liked Boston, and still, in spite of the discomforts of her health, was able to go about, see friends, and take part in the affairs which interested her. She was always an ardent supporter of women's rights, even though at that time votes for women seemed impossibly far away. Her old interest in acting never diminished, so that she went to the theater whenever she could. She recorded seeing the great actress Ellen Terry. She did not put into her journal how she did not put into her journal how she and Miss Terry were the guests of honor at a luncheon soon afterwards, and how the actress, being asked for an autograph, wrote down, "My ambition is gratified. I sit at the same table and behold with my own eyes the authoress of Little Women." Through all of this time, Louisa still wrote steadily. The book upon which she was working when her mother was ill, Under the Lilacs, was published a year after A Modern Mephistopheles, although she planned various novels later. Indeed, her mind was always a seething ferment of plans. She never wrote another book for grown-ups. It was hard to go on writing Under the Lilacs, while her heart was so bowed down with sorrow, but she finished it, and made of it her usual cheerful, lively tale. It was at the time of May's death that she struggled to the end of Jack and Jill, another story apparently quite unclouded by the grief which its author was facing. This book has to do with Concord and the Concord children, but reflects, it seems, the little invalid girl whom Louisa taught in those first years of breadwinning. It appeared the year that Lulu came from Switzerland. From that time forth, most of Louisa's published work was short stories, brought out in various collections. Through the whole of those final years, however, she was working on Joe's Boys. That book seems to be the background of everything that she did. To be connected with all the events which followed, she tried to work on it in the cottage at Nonquiet, whither Anna and her boys and Lulu and her nurse and Bronson Alcott all used to come for the summer. It was a flimsy little wooden house, with a tower and all the fantastic architecture which that period would put into hastily built wooden dwellings. It had one glorious feature in Louisa's eyes. It was without the curse of a kitchen. How many hot hours she had toiled over cook stove and dishpans to keep her family properly provided for. Now she need do it no more, and she did not even want the faintest reminder of such necessity. She made games and dramas for the children to act, the little girls who came to play with Lulu, but she did not make progress with Joe's Boys. In the pleasant, sunny house in Louisburg Square, which she took so that she might be altogether in Boston, she congratulated herself that Lulu was so pleased with her nursery, and her father with his pleasant room. There is no mention of a study or of any privacy for herself, where she could write in peace, so even here, even in spite of the troubled urgings of Thomas Niles, Joe's Boys did not go forward. She was obliged to leave the others at last, and take a room at the Bellevue, with John Pratt for more quiet company. Anna's 2 boys were grown now and working in the firm of Roberts Brothers. Later, she adopted John, the younger, and gave him the name of Alcott. It was necessary that she should have someone to be her direct legal heir to inherit her copyrights when she was gone. John was very close to her, and was with her more than were the others. She began going in the summer to the mountain house near Princeton, Massachusetts. Across the road from the hotel was a cottage where she could have quiet and be free from the eternal staring of the people who liked to hunt down celebrities. Her health was more and more broken, but she was still erect, commanding, and overflowing with friendship and good spirits. She was still, as always, interested in girls who were making their own way, and she liked to gather the working girls of the hotel staff, bring them all to her room, and hear them discuss their problems and ambitions. At different times, she wrote many short stories on the subject of girls who faced the difficulty of breadwinning, the most of them being gathered in the collection, A Garland for Girls. In the tale out of that number, called Poppies and Wheat, we see something of her experiences as a traveling companion on that first expedition to Europe. There were, at the hotel, mentioned 2 little girls from the West, very devoted and very busy with their dolls. She put them into Joe's boys and was finally bringing it to an end. The story is a sequel to Little Men and has to do with Plumfield and the further fortunes of the boys gathered there and of the March family. For the interpretations and the long intervals between the terms of writing, she apologized in the preface, saying that the book cannot be as good a piece of work as she desired. Louisa's preferences were always modest. They always showed her as seeing the faults of the book rather than taking satisfaction in its true worth. In the last lines, she said with finality, "The curtain falls forever on the March family." The mountain house was built upon the slope of an old friend, Wachusett. From her window, Louisa could look down upon a valley which had lived in her memory through all the changing years. She could see the still river, the broad sloping meadows, rising to rugged hillsides. She could see fruit lands. What must she have thought as she sat looking upon that scene of bitter struggle, where her father's and her mother's hearts came so near to being broken, where she herself had first awakened to the sense of responsibility. The whole valley was pink with June laurel now, so peaceful and so still, as though no desperate battles of the spirit could ever have taken place amid that serene landscape. She was so glad to be coming to the end of her book. She put down her pen and sat looking from the window for a long time. She knew that once this was finished, she was to write no more. Louisa was never to see old age. She died after increasing illness 2 years later on the 6th of March, 1888. The last summer she spent in Wachusett, not writing but sitting quietly at the window, looking down on fruitlands. Later, a few days before her own end, she stood by the bedside of her father, who was fading imperceptibly into death, as a long life does. When nearing its final limit, she was too ill to stay with him. While driving home, she caught cold with fatal effect. When she died, she did not know that Bronson Alcott had gone just before her. What she did know was that she had taken care of him to the very last of his needing her, that she had been able to guard and protect and watch over the entire family. That indeed was happy ending. That was the whole of what she had wanted from life, just to take care of them all. And that is the end of Invincible Louisa. If you would like to know more about Little Women and Louisa May Alcott, you can check out the podcast Readapted, hosted by Chris Hambrick, where she talks about all of the adaptations of the novel and the history of Louisa May Alcott. As for this channel, you will, if you are paying attention live, it is the middle of October, so we will be drifting into spooky season, and I will see you in the next book.